Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the rear axle of a Honda Fit. This is a 2007. I'm sure that they're fairly similar over multiple generations. I'm going to describe how to do it. Some of the videos, things that you need to remove and replace are going to be separate, not included in this video. And then if you need to reference those, then they'll be available. So for instance, removing and replacing the shocks, the rear brakes, and the springs. That'll all be required to remove the rear axle. So this video is going to show you specifically the rear axle portions, and then I'm going to walk through right now what you're going to need to do. So what happened is the car got into an accident and the rear axle got bent. So we were thinking, well, we could scrap the car, but then when we looked at the actual damage, it seemed just the car runs good. Maybe just replace the rear axle and do a little other maintenance while we're in there. And then, for fairly cheap, you have the car keep running instead of going out and buying a new car or something like that. Step one, get the car up on jack stands. You're definitely going to need this. You're going to have jacks available for some of these steps. The next thing you're going to want to do is take off the shocks. It's fairly easy, so you can just reference a video. I'm going to post a link probably up here somewhere, or it's going to be in the description down below. Then you're going to need to remove the springs and start disconnecting the brake lines. You're going to have to remove the wheel sensor, wheel speed sensor. You're also going to have to remove the parking brake cable. In order to do that, you're going to have to remove the rear brakes, so the drum brakes. While you're in there, might as well replace them with new ones. That's what I did. Even with the car had 220,000 miles on it, never touching the rear brakes as far as replacement or anything like that. They did not need to be done, but just because I was removing them, might as well do it. So it's not that expensive to get new components. I also replaced the rear shocks while I was at it. One of them was bent, and so I needed replacing anyways. Now, in order to get the rear axle out, you're going to have to disconnect the rear muffler, which is fairly easy. You're likely to break the bolts to do that, especially if you live up in the Midwest or the salt states. That's pretty easy. It's just, like I said, 2 bolts, and then there's some hangers. Remove the muffler. You're also going to have to disconnect the fuel filler neck. That is a little bit of a pain in the butt. There's a plastic shield that you're going to have to get into and remove. And then I'm going to try to reference some replacement snaps for you. When you go back to replace the plastic cover, you're likely to have broken the clips. So there's something you can buy at like AutoZone or something like that to help you just snap them back into place. Along with the fuel filler neck, there's also a return line as well that has to get disconnected, and then the bracket has to be removed down, in front of the rear axle. Once that is all disconnected, there's a flexible section in the filler neck that allows you to pull to let it hang down enough and be able to get the rear axle out. Once that's complete, it's basically the reverse of removal. You just put it back in. There's basically, after you remove the shocks and the springs, there's only 2 19mm bolts that hold it into place. They're pretty easy to get out. At least that was my experience. It doesn't look like they have any rust or anything like that because they're internal to the car. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get it back in, but I do kind of show some tips there. So without further ado, let's get to it. So this is the damage from the accident. It looks like it's pretty much just the rear axle and the rear bumper cover. It's a Michigan car, so there's some rust that I might try to remediate a little bit while I'm at it. There's a little bit of body damage on the side there. I might try to fix that. Mostly I'm just going to try to get the car into a drivable condition. So first step, I think, might be to try to remove the rest of that bumper just so I have some clearance, and then get these wheels off. Get the car jacked up and then get the wheels off. So let's start there. Okay, one thing to check is, what did they leave you on this axle? So this is the donor axle right here. They call it the rear axle. and where do they cut things? So I can see right here we got the brake line. It runs over, and it looks like it got cut at the looks like at the hard line on the body. That's good. So I can try to disassemble it here and leave the one on the body and just connect it here. Just cut that off. They did the same thing over here. Now let's see, the speed sensors, looks like they were able to unplug them on both sides, so that's good. So really what I need to do is disassemble here. Now there's a parking brake cable, and it looks like that got cut. So you know, what we can do is to preserve the parking brake would be to try to take it off here and then see if we can reattach the same you know, from the car back in here. So I'll take this bracket off, this unattach this, which looks like I'll have to take the drum off, so I'll have to figure that out. Probably end up doing it on the car side first to figure that out. This shock I'm just going to remove. I'm guessing they left it because they probably couldn't get this bolt out, so that's not a good sign. Though I don't see any evidence of a socket on there. So spray some anti-seize on that sucker, and then we'll take this off. I just got new shocks because mine were blown anyways. Other than that, the car doesn't look like it. This doesn't look like it's in too bad a shape, though I could probably check the rear brakes. The bushing looks intact on this side, and then also on this side. So overall, the axle doesn't look like it's in bad shape, and it doesn't look like it's been bent as far as I can tell, though you never tell by eye if it's only slightly out. These are where the springs go. I do have springs, new springs that came with this axle, which doesn't really matter. The next step is to remove the shocks and the springs. That's fairly easy and straightforward. If you can't figure it out, I'll have a video posted. I'm going to try to put the link on this video, but if not, you'll see it in the description down below. Alright, to get these brake lines off, the best way I found is you got to clip using vice grips to hold the bracket on the back side, because otherwise it'll start spinning. Use a line wrench, 10 millimeters. If it starts to freeze up on you, like it's not going to go, use a little bit of heat on the nut. That should break it loose. Alright, so you got to remove this out of here, and there's just a clip that you can push out. It looks like this. It's just stuck in here. You just pull it off with a pliers. You pry it off with a screwdriver. Next is we got to remove the wheel speed sensors. There's a clip here, and then we'll follow this back to the electrical connector, which feels like it's up inside the car. So we'll do that next. Okay, it's a little embarrassing. I have kids. My wife's car doesn't get cleaned out a lot, but you move the seat forward a little bit, you pull this up, and you can't see it because it gets too dark, but right under there is the clip for the speed sensor. Alright, so you do got to take the muffler out. You can see that I already have the axle out, but I was optimistic that I could get everything out without having to take the muffler out. So 2 bolts. I ended up breaking the stud. I don't know if you can see the studs are still stuck in it. The bolt heads broke off, so I'm going to replace those with stainless steel bolts just from hardware store, nothing fancy there. And then on the other side, you have to do a lot of work with the fuel filler. So the fuel filler neck comes down here. It's covered with a plastic piece that has just a bunch of those like pop out plastic fasteners. And then you have to undo this, which is actually pretty easy. What you do is you just squeeze these two together, and then you slowly can work this thing up and off. A little bit of work, but not that bad. No special tool required. Then there's like 2 10mm bolts. This is going to be hard to see up in there. It's kind of towards the bottom here. And then one up right close to the filler inlet. And then here you just pull the plastic shroud out. There's a little nut screw holding it in on this side. Okay, underneath the car, you have this thing going on right here. This is the filler neck for the fuel tank, and then a breather. All right, further back here, there's a bracket. You have to undo the bolts. There's one on either side, and then there's one holding this shield right here. That has to get undone in order to have enough play to be able to drop the filler neck tube down, and then we'll be able to clear the axle here. Okay, at this point, in order to get the parking brake cable off, you're gonna have to remove the brakes, and so I'll have a video about that somewhere up here. It's very similar to a lot of other drum brakes, kind of a overall pain in the butt as drum brakes can be. I'm not a fan of them. I think I'll mention that a few times in the video. If the link doesn't show up here, check in the description down below. Alright, the bolts should just come right out. I did jack it up just a little bit so this is horizontal. That seemed to help. They're pretty long. You do it on both sides, 19mm socket. I used an impact. It seemed to help. Had to show the beautiful clouds in the background. Okay, now that the old axle's out, it's time to install the new one, and we'll start with putting in basically the 19mm bolts, and then working, connecting the brake lines, reconnect the speed sensors, then putting the brakes back together, so connecting into the parking brakes, and putting the filler caps and stuff back in. So I'm trying to get the new axle in. As you can see, it's not really lining up very well, so there's a lot of it's sticking out on this side. Now if I go to the other side, kind of the same scenario. It's sticking out. So what I think, and this is just kind of how it's just going to be a tough install, try to get it lined up as close as possible, and I think start working in both at the same time. I'm going to have to work through this. I've never done it before, so it's kind of a learning curve for me as well. I don't think this is wrong. I was doing some measurements with the old axle, and it's about 50 inches from the old axle from here to there. Well, this is only 49 inches, so I think what happens is this bushing gets pushed in when it's installed, and so somehow we're going to have to simulate that, I think, in order to help get this axle in first. Okay, I got it in. It wasn't actually as hard as I thought. It took a bit of time, but I got the other side pinned, and then I jacked this side up as high as I could off this where the spring perch is, and it was still hanging out, I don't know, about half an inch or so. And then using the pry bar, I was kind of able to get in and like around this lip a little bit and just push it back just a little bit, and get it so that it was about 1/4 of an inch sticking out. And then what I ended up doing is just sitting back and kind of kicking it with my heel, and I got it all the way popped in. So now I'm using 2 jacks to hold up the thing. So there's the other one over there, or was holding it. And here you can see I had the bolt in to kind of help keep this side hung as I was getting it in, and then I just adjusted the angle of the axle. So it was a little bit of a pain in the butt, and this hasn't quite got in to the threaded side on the other side, but at least this is kind of half the battle. It feels like it's starting a little bit though with my hand. So that's how I got the axle in from this point, and then what I'll do is I'll secure the filler neck here, brackets, and then start buttoning up the rest of it. Alright, so I got these bolts in, hand start them, that's kind of important. I put anti-seize on them and then ran them in with an impact, and then I'll probably torque them to like 150 something foot-pounds. Starting on the brake lines, just one tip is that if it seems like it's frozen up as you're trying to screw it in, like the nut on the end won't spin, go ahead and get some heat on it, and it melts the plastic a little bit and it frees it up. So the next steps are to install the brake lines, and I did that because then you're kind of have everything out of the way. Then install the fuel filler neck, put that back in. Then get the wheel speed sensors reinstalled. Then do the shocks and the springs. And the reason I do those last is because then they're kind of out of the way while you're messing with everything else. Followed by you got to put the parking brake cable back in. So at that point would be to do the brake job. And so I'll have a link either here or down in the description on how to do that. And then you're pretty much done. So if you liked the video, thought it was helpful, please give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you want to check out some of my other videos about photography and stuff, then please do so. And if you want to subscribe, I'd appreciate it. If you have any constructive criticism or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to get to them when I can. And I think that's about it. Thank you very much.